I co-founded the Cape Town International Jazz Festival, and for my sins was festival director for 15 years. Gathered today on stage, we have some of the boldest and financially courageous promoters, and we want to get, in the short time, to get as much information as possible from them. But we're talking about a high-level delegation. They both all executives in their own right, but through their own work, they deal with the technical aspect of events we do. So briefly, gentlemen, got 45 minutes. If you can just 2 minutes, who you are, what you do, and who you work for.
My name is Osmic Menoe. I'm the director of a company called Ritual Media Group. The Ritual Media Group is a company that creates properties. We work within the hip-hop culture. So we own something called Back to the City Hip Hop Festival, which is a 12-year-old festival, and I think for the last 6-7 years has been the biggest gathering of these hip-hop kids. And also we do something called the South African Hip Hop Awards, which is a 7-year-old hip hop award ceremony. We also do something called the South African Hip Hop Summit, which is a 5-year-old summit. We also have something called the South African Hip Hop Museum in partnership with Museum Africa. And we also do something called the South African Hip Hop Association. That's some of the work that we do. And we also sit on advisory panels of some of the brands, like Sprite South Africa, like Power Play, Red Bull, where our role is to kind of advise on how to engage the younger market. So that's some of the work that we do.
My name is Steve Mashiyane. I am from a company called Mashiyane Lento Promotions. I've been in the industry, I think for safely 20 years. I'm a music promoter, and I've served on quite a number of boards. At the moment, I'm also the CEO of the Moses Kotane Foundation. Thank you.
China is the name, from Cape Town. I'm the chairperson of NPM Group, which consists of various divisions. Also the chief executive of CISAN's events. I'm also the CEO of a communication and marketing management company called Linmo. I also serve in the body of music promoters in this country called SAMPA with my fellow colleague Steve. South African Music Promoters as a president. I'm also the former chairperson of a structure that we constituted with the likes of President of MASA called MIFSA as a chairperson then. Currently directing South African Afro Music Awards, which will take place in the next 3 months at Carnival City. I'm also the festival director of one big event in Cape Town at every 31st of December called Homecoming Music Festival. I'm also part of the committee which was established by the Department of Trade and Industry and Arts and Culture on Technical and Production Transformation Forum as an executive member of the forum. Also the chairperson of the foundation. Thank you.
My name is Pleasure Letsoalo. I am the founder of a company called CANOC, spelled C-A-N-O-C, which is an acronym for Creating a Nation of Creatives. For the longest of time, we've purely been focused on bringing international artists into South Africa. Such artists include Chris Brown, Rick Ross, Drake, Lil Wayne, Maxwell, Kenny G, Tony Braxton, Babyface, just to mention a few. Pretty much, I think that's quite straightforward what we do. Thank you very much.
Like I said, we're dealing with quite a executive level producers. And I want to go into major challenges first. You know, there's risk, there's money, there's technical requirements, there's technical production, programming, marketing, human capital, then of course, profit and loss. Just in terms of, there is a saying, never risk what you cannot afford. If you look at your technical riders that you get in with all levels of artists, was there a compromise? Did you have to negotiate a compromise? It also relates to cost in some of the technical riders. And did you find the adequate equipment in the country?
When we talk technical production, and maybe just to give a little bit of context, particularly with myself, while I started in the music industry as a composer and a performing artist, I still can't really say I understood the technical aspects. And when I eventually evolved into the promotion aspects, the technical rider in itself was a very complicated document that I just didn't understand. I know what's an SM57, I know what's a console, and I know what's a PA. But the minute you start talking Neve console, the minute you start talking line array, the minute you start talking all sorts of, quite complicated jargon related to that technical rider, I don't understand. So the biggest challenge has always been when an artist gives me a technical rider and I then give it to a sound company or a production or technical production manager, are they really giving me, from a cost perspective, what they're going to deliver inside the venue? Am I really paying for what's on that technical rider? I think for me that's always been the biggest challenge. So you can't really, you can't really put you don't understand the cost. And is it really the cost to actually set up that particular stage? And are those really the mics that they've really asked for? Is that the PA that they asked for? And have you delivered that PA?
Maybe that just comes to the human resources, the human capital. Is the technical, the producer or manager, does he work or she works in the interest of your budget?
My experience, it starts with the skills to understand what is it that you need to do when you set up an event, what needs to come before, what needs to come after, From the cost point of things, it's important that when you set up an event, you first check up with the artists that after you've conceptualized the event you're going to be doing, you then go and make sure that you have your lineup. So that with your lineup, you then know exactly in terms of the production rider, production riders from the artists. You then work retrospective to know what type of sound, what type of equipment, technically and in terms of production. So that by the time you go and say, this is the cost of the event that I'm going to be, needing to then stage this particular activity event, then you are informed. Because I've seen how quite number of events or activities gets to shoot up in terms of budgets, because you wouldn't necessarily understand, the hierarchy protocol of, staging an activity or an event. You go and look for a sound and so forth and so on, and by the time you get to the technical writers, the artist comes with, you get a shock, And when you look at how much you would have budgeted versus what they would then say they need, then it becomes a problem, which then escalates into the challenges into this industry. So I think it's an issue of truly understanding, what you're doing as an event producer or as a promoter, and understanding what needs to come before what needs to be coming thereafter.
My view is that this matter is actually beyond what we are dealing with now. Our company will be celebrating 30 years next year of experience. Now, the bigger picture, it's not necessarily the technical rate. The biggest challenge is the fact that the industry is not legislated. Now, that opens up gaps and opportunities for anyone who happen to be someone. If my uncle is a DG of a particular department or is a CEO of one of the corporation, is able to give me a budget to put up a project, experience or no experience, I don't even have an edge to begin to understand what needs to be done because I've got a budget to just do it. Now, the practitioners that are dealing with this responsibility on a daily basis get milked out because they understand what needs to be done. You can't be a promoter that's folded arms and sit at the boardroom because you need to understand the production, the technical, and all other aspects of marketing and legislation in order for you to be able to plan your project properly. Because if you don't understand, it means you're in the wrong trade. Now, secondly, on the issue of legislation, there's nothing that links the promoters, which is executives of every project, with the technical companies or institutions. There's no stage where these two bodies, we tried that 15 years ago, if you remember, with the PETA and so forth, with the TPSA then. But there's nothing that links the thing so that there's an understanding of what are the requirements from both aspects of these institutions. Now, up until we're in that space, we'll be able to do, as we stand now, it means any individual will do as he wishes. If you have a budget, you pay. If you don't have a budget, you mess up. And that does not give us a very good sensation in terms of running a proper production across the spectrum.
Okay, I know you went into legislation, but the future has more value than the past. So we're looking at the future. And that's another subject because you also sit on that board. But I was just looking from a technical aspect that are there enough skilled people within our midst to do that particular job of advising on they want a Hammond B3 organ. You don't have to ship it in, we've got one sitting there. But let's just go
just on that one, Rashid. I think if we answer your question directly, we need to understand, to analyze what is a promoter. Because if you are a promoter and you operate as an individual, it means you're shortcoming yourself and the industry itself. You can't be a company and not have technical people within your space. For instance, our company, we decided to, all we know is the rest of anything that has got to do with the project. But the actual production, as much as we have an idea, it's not our space. We therefore took a conscious decision, which is also a political decision, based on our responsibility as African people, to make sure that we adopt SARA as our production institution in all the projects that we do.
Absolutely, agree with you. Yeah.
Maybe just to add on there before you come in, my brother. To further answer your question more direct, Rashid, we do have skills in South Africa. And to a large degree, there are equipment, in South Africa for staging, your proper events. But I think your question has to be who has this equipment, And I think that's what SARA and this conference supposed to be, trying to address. These skills within black people, and disadvantaged individuals, how much of this equipment is owned by black people and why? So that we get to the crux of the matter to say, for us to then come back to your question to say, why don't we have sufficient equipment? And why don't we have appropriate skills and expertise in South Africa? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
we will then retrospectively get to the questions to say, who is choking the industry from its transformation and the transformational agenda that we're supposed to be driving to get to, So yes, we do have skills, but when you do a skills audit, it's still largely within the white minority, And question is, what is it that as an industry we need to be doing? What is it that this conference is supposed to be doing? Are we sitting here and become some society that shares industry good practices? Are we a society that comes here and brag to say this is who I am, this is what I do? Are we here to say, and talk about all that we know year in, year out? Or are we saying we need to sit and empower this conference to have probably, coming up with solutions, coming up with some kind of a subsidiary of this particular conference where there can be industry players that needs to be nominated and have a subsidiary of this conference where there will be a proper workshop that all other affected parties from government and private sector, that particular subsidiary then goes and add value in your white paper development to empower and transform this industry, go to the relevant departments to make sure that we don't come here year in, year out and talk about same things that we almost know what are the challenges,
But then it would be good if you can take that initiative. But you must remember that this conference is looking at skills, the lack of skills. There was a very interesting stats coming from the University of the Northwest that currently there are 600 and plus, probably 1, 2, or 10 events annually, annual events, not a new one, 600. If we start looking at our workforce, are we preparing our kids for that for the next 5 to 10 years? My own opinion, I'm not sure. But let's just get back to before we go there, because now we're going to open another subject on the. I agree with you. This industry hasn't been transformed since '94. Everything was transformed: mining, construction, blah 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 blah, except the creative economy. But like I said, the future looks good. That's why we're here together. But let me just give this comrade in particular, you're coming back to technical writing because you've got one of the finest, the only hip-hop awards. And I think the Western Cape leads there somehow.
Yeah.
But how do you find, you're getting all these technical writers and...
I think what we've always been able to do, especially within the festival, because obviously with the festival, that's where it gets tricky, because you've got obviously all these different acts, international guys, the local guys. And I think the one thing sometimes we've seen is that a lot of times when you get a technical writer, it's sometimes guys just really taking a chance, in all honesty, because the guy's going to go Google the best mixer he can find on the line, the best turntables, and says, yes, I want those things, So we've always had the muscle to come back and say, no, but if the industry standard is this, because that's the beauty about, I think, our culture, we've got certain things, there's like that specific mixer that all the top DJs uses.
That's your negotiations, how you find a compromise.
So you find a compromise, because like I say, a lot of times you find the guy is looking for some drum machine that you can't find here, but that's because he probably went and tried to sort of Google it, But that's what we do. We say, cool, this is what we have. And this is industry standards, and this is international, just not even local. And, you know, we speak to the guys. But half the time, I think everyone understands, and, you know, the show goes on.
Do you agree, just in terms of those kind of technical writers coming, and mainly from artists outside of our borders, that at this stage they realize that South Africa is well equipped?
I would say it is. I would say it is because for some time now, especially because the DJ part, because the DJs are the ones that sometimes would be playing with like 6 different machinery there, and he sends that and be able to get it, you know. And I think also what the beauty I think that we've been doing, because sadly the hip hop space has always worked in silos, where we've always seen ourselves as it's ourselves, because we've tried to knock everywhere else, but never really got any form of assistance. So we've started developing a lot of things. So you speak about a technical manager. So you literally have kids that are, you know, whether they're studying music or they're interested in the industry, where we start actually teaching them with the idea that in the next 3 years, that becomes the person who's in charge. So we kind of never really run out of, you know, certain managers, whether it's a hospitality manager, whether it's a technical, whether it's, you know, it's someone who deals with all the catering people coming up with processes, because we've developed them, you know, within the festival. So I think with initiatives such as that, it always makes, I think, the festival a little bit easier. Sure.
But also on those technical rallies, you always have this crew coming with, you know, as if we don't have, and it's just, have you been able to sort of, you know, don't worry, we've got front of house, we've got sound engineers, we've got, because a lot of times they fly in and it all adds to your budget. And that's also, you know, being able to negotiate that.
Yeah.
The issue relating to most international artists not wanting to agree to that sort of arrangement is, unfortunately, international artists don't think there's value in South Africa. They don't believe that they will, I mean, you know, a lot of international guys still think there's lions and elephants running around in our streets.
Have you tried telling them coming to the motherland?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so the problem here is that international artists don't really think that there is enough value in the country. And that's why if you look at the touring circuits, you've got America, you've got Europe, you've got China, you've got Australia, and then we are classed under emerging markets, even though we've got a little over 1 billion people. And, you know, we coupled with the Middle East also. So when you tell, I don't know, a Beyonce, and she's traveling in 3 747s, and she's got a party of about 500 to 700 people, her per diems will cost you a little under 2.5 million per day, particularly because of that crew. If you say to her, hey, listen, I've got a guy that's going to run your front of house in South Africa, she's thinking, forget it. It's not going to happen. Why? Because I just don't believe that you guys have the skills to understand my repertoire. I just don't believe that you understand the level at which my artistry is at. And that's really the big issue with trying to...
But the artists like that is a bit beyond out of our reach.
Yeah.
But in your own experience, you've brought artists out, some big names, and it was very successful.
Yes, they were very successful. But again, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's a Beyonce, and with not trying to insult someone, but you know, someone as little as Maxwell, or someone as little as Tiger, you know, he's not interested because they all have the same view. They all have the same view across the board to say, well, I don't know, it's a bit of a risk. If you say to another artist, say, look, perhaps let's have the Soweto Orchestra backing you up to participate in, you know, a very great experience as part of your performance. They'll say, well, I travel with my own orchestra. I'm not too sure. Yes, there have been instances where some of them agree, where some of them will say, yes, you can use local personnel in certain, functions.
But that's a negotiation.
But it's a negotiation, but overall, in general, it's a no.
I think also it's an issue of just business, how you look at it from the business perspective. And it's very important, first and foremost, to also acknowledge that when you deal with artists, they are brands within their own rights. And if within their spectrum view, they then feel this particular production keeps in line with who they are, I think that needs to be respected. So it also goes back to issue of, as a business individual or as a business company or as a brand, you know, what you do is you negotiate depending on the type of production you wanna stage. Like you say, if you wanna stage a particular production and you can still negotiate to say, we can give you backing artists or we can give you technical people around, but if you're doing your upmarket, type of your activity, it's always good, so that also your event, people get to have the best of the best from the particular artist, you know. So I think it also, you know, works with what type of event you wanna do, and it's largely it's about the business and the business skill on how you negotiate on what you wanna do, basically.
We also got a culture of each one teach one in terms of how we're trying to learn.
Mr. Lombard,
Yeah, well,
you know, in my opening remarks, I said there's so much that can be done in this question. My view, we can't pretend as if we don't know how this industry works.
how it doesn't work.
In this business, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you have negotiated for. Whether you're a promoter, whether you're a technical person, whether you're an artist, if you don't know your story, you'll be messed up. But if you know your story, you'll be fine. We have done international projects. We have never experienced any challenge in terms of the technical stuff because they will take what is available. If they ask for Mercedes-Benz and you don't have, you have a BMW, they'll take the BMW. And the fact that they have agreed in principle to come and perform, it means they have an element of acknowledging that you are capable of putting something together. That's number one. Number two, I'm not too sure whether is it lack of respect, is it ignorance, is it us undermining our own people. The very same South African promoters, all of us in this panel and the rest of others, you should ask one simple question. Which company, out of all these companies, have ever requested the services of SARA in their festivals? It's sad. Knowing very well that SARA, it's the only institution in this continent that have the practical skills of our young children.
Don't you think they need a marketing arm? I'm just asking.
No. It's a reality, because if we're not politically conscious about these things, we'll end up remaining with the situation. It's sad when you start looking newspapers, SARA people going to practice their skills abroad when we have all these festivals that we're doing. We're not saying take the entire institution. There's nothing stopping each and every promoter to take 5, 6 people and be able to put them in their production companies. And up until we begin to recognize each and every one of us strengths and skills, we'll remain in the same situation that we're at.
I agree with you, and it's not necessary to take them on, but do that pre and post-production sort of in the field, on-hand training, which I think, which was very interesting. We heard the first speaker this morning. But we were going to hear from Osmic. You wanted to say something? And I know, and I think we must just note that for next year, we must plan a session on policy, because hopefully by then the white paper is done, or it's not done, or we legislated. The sector has to be. But
I was just going to add on, I think, when we talk about how, for instance, the internationals will say, no, I'm bringing my own lighting designer. No, I'm bringing my own this, my own that. So our stance has always been to force this transformation that we keep talking about, because if you're sometimes going to allow it, then it's literally they come here with the skill and they go back with their skill, even though we've got people that can do the same thing. So for the fact that we're saying we've booked you, we're going to pay you X amount, and in these negotiations, you have to use a local person, because this is an event, or this is a festival that is catering for local people, and with the aim of also transforming all these people with these different skills. So that was just my thing to say. Sometimes we gotta foster it, you know?
Perhaps we can also realize that the reason that these international artists come here at the end of the tours, there are a lot of artists that, you know, they've been big in America for the longest of times, and only after America doesn't want them, they then only decide that they're coming to Africa. So we also need to understand the position that we are in, that we are not considered a proper touring circuit. The average artist in America is doing 100, 200 shows. You know, in Europe, a couple of hundred more. By the time they come to Africa, they only have Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town if they're lucky. So one of the reasons that they don't value what we have here is because they don't believe we give them enough money in any case.
So on the positive side, don't you think that gives producers and promoters like yourselves an opportunity to demystify the emerging market? Because it's all about being able to, I mean, the Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth, everyone misses it. But there's a huge audience there. There might not be enough venues. I mean, we look at 3,000 to 4,000, nice capacity indoors, that you can work the numbers around that.
I think what will really go a long way in helping us to be able to confidently negotiate these issues around participation is the establishment of an African touring circuit. Because if we come together as an entire continent to make sure that the artists can tour the 100 or 200 dates in Africa, then we're talking about something else. Then the artist knows that, you know what, he's coming to Africa to perform for 50 dates or 100 dates. Then it's easy for them, or for us to say to them, listen, you are going to get such and such a person doing this in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Angola, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa. But we need to come together for that to actually happen, for the establishment of that touring circuit.
Absolutely, it's positive and it's there. It's just again how we take such subjects further.
The media is the problem, but also the solution. In what sense? The gentleman behind you spoke about how they were touring for so long, 3 months on end, without any funding. And the common denominator there is the technological advancements that the media plays a massive role in. There's this big thing that we keep talking about, local content, local content, local content. If you look at in the 90s, if you were wearing baggy jeans and speaking like an American, you stuck out like a sore thumb. Because Kwaito was the big thing. Kwaito was the hip-hop of South Africa at that time. Why? Because we did not have enough access to the outside world. So when the media essentially took all of that content and started feeding this country specifically with the cultures of America, with the cultures of Europe and all sorts of stuff, we as a market have absorbed all of that, and that in itself has induced a wanting for what is outside and not necessarily what we have in our country. This is the very reason why it's so easy for me as a promoter, and if I wear my business hat, it's so easy for me to invest 10 million rands into bringing an international artist and make far much more money than I would with a local artist. And not that I hate my local artists, I'm just talking about it from a business perspective.
Absolutely,
And the media,
it's a choice you made.
Exactly, the media is there and it's showing us all these American programs. It's showing us all these other European it's feeding us that culture. And that's what we want. Our kids want to be like Kim Kardashian. You know,
Ish.
our daughters want to be like Kim Kardashian. Our kids, our young sons dress up like Chris Brown and Lil Wayne, and they want to have tattoos. These are not cultures that, are from Africa per se. These are cultures that come from outside the country, and the media is it's literally at the top to induce that interest.
How do we balance on up and coming and established artists? My assumption, we are speaking on the basis of line-up on project, on events. 25 years ago, any promoter will wake up in the morning and book up posters and banners, the show will be packed. Simple. Without big names, without anything. But currently, if you do that, it's a suicide that you're causing for yourself. Read newspapers every Sunday. Be City Press, be Sunday Sun, you'll notice that the majority of events that are taking place all over the country, 60-70% of the artists that and that lineup are more or less the same artist. Which is very sad, because the rest of other artists don't get that opportunity. But if you're looking from the business perspective, the promoters are gunning for people that will put bums on the seats, period. Because if you remember, or if you understand, promoter is the last person that makes a risk in a project. By the time that event, first song starts working, everybody else there, a vendor, supplier, artist, sound, everyone has been paid except you as a promoter. So you can't make risk as much as I would love to promote you, but I have to do that knowing very well I've got all these big names that I know are popular for this market. It's a business decision.
Absolutely.
So best advice I can give you, create a relationship with those promoters. And the relationship must be very fair, because you don't want to be incorporated to an event and you're asked to perform at 10 o'clock in the morning when they know very well majority of people are starting coming in at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting any publicity on that.
It's very important that we get to be understood. Before anything else, we are business people.
Yeah.
And it's not only around the service providers or issues of transformation or empowerment. It even a social psych. As a promoter, you would have so many friends for free tickets. And it's very important that we need to make it a point that the society understands that, we're running a business, at the end of the day. But now, as we are here, as my last point, I think we also have an obligation to make sure that we drive the issue of making sure that the industry transforms, the industry gets to be united, and the industry have a voice, a one uniform voice. And I'm saying that is why we have so many organizations. Now, I would then say to the House, everybody that is here who's got an interest in this industry, who are players in this industry, find an organization that speaks to the area where you are, go and join that organization, so that together you are able to then drive, and together you are able to then make sure that you are ahead, and I still want to make my submission, formally, to say, Sarah and LETPC, please let us look into this matter of making sure that we don't have a conference year in, year out, where we come and recycle issues without an action. Let us sit and find ways that will make sure that at the end of the day, whatever we agree, if we invite arts and culture as an example, they must give us somebody who's a decision maker, who will sign up on a particular, what we will call it, at that particular time that would be befitting, to say, at a particular time X, we need to have been seeing Resolution 345 being implemented, so that when we come again the next year, we know that first and foremost we're going to get reports, and then we are building on something moving forward. Thank you.
I feel that the festival, or not even festival, but the large-scale events, it's a research that I've been doing for the last 3 to 4 years, that are in danger. And for those that do them, would know what I'm talking about. I think it's an industry that's very much in danger if we actually don't sit down and start solving it. Because if you start looking at European trends, a lot of the big festivals in Europe have started shutting down. If you look at the American side, a lot of the big events started to shut down because of financial. Because the problem with putting together a large-scale event is obviously the cost of production and the cost of manpower. And what is starting to happen right now, and I don't know if people are noticing it, is that the same people that we are hustling for money from, which are brands, they starting to put their own events together. So now, from nowhere, my festival is now in competition with Castlelight, you know? So Castlelight is now in competition with Kenok, because
But that was his client.
you know, but that was his client in the beginning.
How
You know
did
what
I
I'm
get
saying?
it?
So that is starting to happen where these big brands are starting to put their own festivals together.
I think, you know, it obviously it's going to be the nature of the industry, but it's again how we set the trends, how we set standards for ourselves.
But there's another bigger problem, and this problem is called safety and security.
Yeah.
Because what is happening now is that companies such as CompuTickets, you go to an event and there's bootleg tickets outside that are somehow still legit and can go in. And you find that also the security companies have become a big problem because they're not liable. So you hire, I'll give you an example. In my festival, I hire 7 different security companies that cost me $750,000. But every time when you find someone outside selling tickets or has stepped this one, the guy says, sorry, pay me. The security company is never liable because there's that culture where the people will jump the fence and the people will rob people, but nothing's going to happen. But
It's a
what that
challenge.
tends to happen is that people
Yep.
start having a negative, I think, effect on such industries. Why should I go to that festival? I'm probably going to get robbed or pickpocketed. And then the festival promoter starts going, okay, but why put this event together when I'm not getting enough money? And also the clientele that's meant to be buying these tickets are buying a fake ticket outside and still want the same entertainment. So I think I do not know what platform this lies in, but I think there is a big problem coming up like ahead of us, because also a lot of these brands, once again, because that's where big monies are coming from, are starting to focus their energies in different areas, because they're saying, I understand you've got 25,000 people at your festival and you want me to give you 2 million rand, but with that 2 million rand, I could do a billboard, I could do a TV advert, and I can do a magazine campaign. Therefore, I can only give you 200,000.
Yes, but the question is, can an event bring the people that a brand wants, that they can touch, they can activate? Billboard can't do that, or ad. And that's why our industry has a future.
For up-and-coming individuals who wants to be promoters, it's for me, firstly, the passion, interest, learning, network, and be diligent in what you do, and be ethical, you know. Yeah, network, and build yourself as a brand. Thank you.
Chief.
I feel we cannot be dealing with this matter in isolation, because it's got quite a number of other elements that needs to be dealt with. I would propose next time it's been given a little bit more time. I mean, if you listen to almost all the speakers of the conference in general, it comes to one thing, the practicalities of all what people are talking about, which is the actual event.
I would say to anyone that wants to become a promoter, they need to understand that fundamentally, as a promoter, you're in the business of asserting the value of an artist at a specific place in a specific country. It's a numbers game. It's not about how you feel. It's really, really a numbers game. You need to crunch numbers. I sometimes used to say we're almost like entertainment actuaries, because one of the reasons that we have been so successful in the choice of artists was that we created a model which I will describe as the 4 pillars of concerting. One, you need to consider money. If you don't have money, forget it. You can't participate in being a promoter because you have to bear all the risk, as he's quite rightly mentioned. The second aspect is that you need to have lead time. The third aspect is that you need to create an artist value projection model. And the last aspect is you need to have context. So there's no point in trying to, and I'm going back into describing a little bit of them, but there's no point in trying to book an artist that you've got no context over. And by way of example, if someone had to say to me in 2011 or whenever it is, come and bring down U2, I'd have said no, not knowing that in less than an hour they were going to gross in excess of 180 million. But essentially, you need to have context to understand. If you are the market, you're the best person to say which artist needs to come here. You need to go and look into statistics relating to the performance of ticket sales of specific artists, not just in South Africa, but in the whole world, to best help you to project how much money you can actually make and what sort of ticket prices you can charge so that you can make your money back. So pretty much, I think, if you consider all of those 4 elements and realize that it's a numbers game, I think you will be well on your way in being able to be a successful promoter.
I think my advice would be, first thing you should do, you should find like a psychologist. That's the first name. In all honesty, I've got a psychologist now. It took me a while. Find a good personal trainer, eat very healthy, drink a lot of water.
As per Andy.
You know, because if you think about it, putting together a 6 million rand, 10 million rand party is a bit crazy if you think about it, and not knowing what the outcomes could be. So you need to, I think, be in a certain, it's about the mind state. You need to put yourself in a certain mind state to understand that should a thunder happen at your festival that you spend 8 million rand on, what does that mean going forward? I think that's my best advice. And before you even started, I think speak, research, people who do such events, you know, such as yourself. You know, before I was at my place, I was researching what the work you were doing, you know, to understand, is that the reality you want for yourself in 15, 20 years' time?